In this video, I thought I'd talk a little bit about long lenses and what sort of length of focal length do you need for wildlife photography. So let's have a little chat about that, shall we? And specifically, I'm going to be talking about the Nikon 180 to 600 and the 800 PF they're both 6.3 lenses. So they're quite comparable in lots of ways. The 800 offers a little bit more range, but who are they for, and how can you get the best out of these lenses? So let us start with the 180 to 600. This was a replacement for my previous telephoto, which was the F-mount 200 to 500, and when I got it, I didn't really think it made a huge difference. I thought they're quite similar lenses, and I still do. I think that they're both flexible zooms. They're both got good image quality. I think this one has got better image quality, but it's not something. I mean, for those people who like looking at sharpness graphs and pixel peeping and so on, I think that this lens would have a clear advantage over the 200 to 500, which is an older lens. So this is, but for me, the sharpness of the 200 to 500 was fine in the real world, in the field, and where most people are going to be looking at your pictures online, possibly with printing, but even then I don't really think there'd be much difference. If I were to print my photos taken with the 200 to 500 and this, I don't think you could tell which was which. But this, having said that, this is a better lens. I think it's and of course it gives you slightly more focal range, 600 as opposed to 500, but this is a fabulous lens. I have to say that. I've been using it for quite a while now, and I think it is a fabulous lens. It's for the money, it's incredibly sharp, and possibly not as sharp as the 400 2.8 and the 600 f4, but those are lenses which cost as much as a new car. But this lens, for the price, it's incredible value for money, and it's got great flexibility. 180 to 600 pretty much covers most wildlife photography needs, I would say. And so why would you need anything else? That's the question, I guess. Why would you need anything else? So let's have a look at something else, shall we? And this is the something else. And this is, of course, the 800mm PF phase Fresnel lens, which is also 6.3 aperture. So this lens has got significant disadvantages over the lens I just showed you. Just putting it down carefully. I don't want it to get smashed. So the 180 to 600 is smaller, cheaper, it's lighter, it's easier to handle. It's got a much better minimum focus distance, which means it's got a much better magnification ratio. So if you're taking pictures of close-up subjects, this is by far the better lens. I did take some photos yesterday. I'll show you. I took some photos yesterday of mating dragonflies, migrant hawkers, and I only had the 800 with me, which I think has got a 5 meter minimum focus distance. So I had to actually step. These insects came and landed on a bush quite near where I was, and I had to step back because I was so close. So the 800 has got real limitations compared to the 180 to 600. The 180 to 600 offers fantastic flexibility. in terms of its focal range. It's got good reach with 600 millimeters. It's sharp. It's reasonably light for a 600 millimeter lens. It's just well designed, and to me it is the perfect all round wildlife lens. You can walk around with this all day long. It's easy to handle, and it's got that flexibility. So why would you need anything else? You know. But I have got something else, and of course the something else is heavy. This is heavy. I mean, it's light for an 800 millimeter lens. I believe I never used it, but I believe the F mount Nikon 800 millimeter was something like almost twice as much in terms of weight as this lens. But so it is. The PF design does give you a lot of focal range for the weight and size, but still, just from the point of view of walking around with this all day, it's not easy. This is a heavy lens. It's a heavy lens to operate and point at flying birds. Having a longer focal range, you've got a smaller field of view, which means finding birds in the sky or something like that is that much more difficult with a lens that has that longer reach. As I said, it's got the restriction of you can't focus on anything within 5 meters of where you are. It's also quite a bit more expensive than the 180 to 600. So why on earth would you buy this? So what are the advantages of using a monster lens like this? Well, it does give you a little bit more reach. The image quality, I would say, is probably a little better than the 180 to 600, although again I look at everything from the point of view of practicality and from the point of view of working in the field with these lenses, and I don't know that you'd really tell on a practical level the difference between a photo taken with the 180 to 600 or the 800. However, I think it is sharper, very slightly sharper. The autofocus is slightly faster, I would say the autofocus on the 180 to 600 to me is fast. It's fast enough for my needs, I think. And I do take a lot of bird in flight photographs. The autofocus on the 180 to 600 is fine for me, but on this lens it's probably that little bit quicker. So that's good. So image quality, slightly better. Autofocus speed, slightly better. And of course you're getting another 25% of extra range with this lens. So all of those things are modest, you could say modest, improvements over the 180 to 600. Is it worth it though to carry around something that's pretty heavy like this as opposed to the 180 to 600? For those, if it were just those things alone, I would say no. However, here's the thing that I do think it does justify its existence in your camera equipment. If you're really into photography, really into wildlife photography, you're the sort of person who's going to use it every day, then I would say yes, it is something you want to think about. This is not a lens, in my view, it's not a lens for beginners. If you're a person who's not experienced at finding birds and so on with binoculars or with a long lens, you haven't used a long lens before, a 500, a 400, a 500, a 600. If you've not used those sorts of lenses before, I wouldn't advise getting this. I think this is a lens which is not likely to be your primary lens. I'd go for something more like the 180 to 600, something with more flexibility. This is an addition to that, and it's really for I would say, the more experienced and dedicated, because I've walked around with this all day over the last few weeks, and you do feel it. It is a lump to carry around. So, but I do love it. Why? You ask. I can hear you all screaming why. Well, the reason I love this lens is because, although what's interesting about aperture is that background blur, subject separation, the quality of the bokeh, whatever you like to call it, is affected by lots of different things. So one of the things obviously is the aperture. The larger the aperture, the more subject separation you're able to achieve in your photographs. The other main thing that affects how blurry your background is, which is something we're always striving for, or almost always striving for in wildlife photography. In landscape photography, you want everything in focus, generally speaking, but in wildlife photography, you want the subject to be very clearly in focus, and the environment less so usually. And often you want the environment or the background to be completely out of focus, so that the beauty of the bird or the animal that you're photographing is really the focal point of the focus of the photograph. It's the focus of the image, and the viewer is in no doubt about what they're being asked to look at, and there aren't distractions in the background to detract from the subject. So that's generally what you're trying to do with wildlife photography. I mean, there's also other kinds of wildlife photography where you might want to include the environment, and that's another thing. But often you want to maybe hint at the environment rather than have the whole thing in focus. So for that reason, you can get a larger aperture lens. You can get closer to, if you get closer to your subject, the background is thrown out of focus more dramatically, more as you get closer to your subject. Obviously with this lens, I won't say close, relatively close I'm talking about. But then the third thing is the focal range of the lens, and this lens having a larger focal range, the compression effect of the telephoto, super telephoto lens provides a much more out of focus background, or a smoother background. Even the difference between 600 and 800, I think, is apparent when you look at these lenses. You look at the photographs that you get from these lenses, you see that that beautiful out of focus background is easier to achieve with this lens than it is with the 180 to 600. So that's my thinking on it, and I think that if you're really dedicated to, let's put that down carefully, if you're really dedicated to your photography, and these little improvements, as it were, make a difference to you, then I would say go for the 800, or get the 800 in addition to your regular, maybe all-purpose or general-purpose wildlife lens. So those are my thoughts. I'd be very interested to hear what you think, but those are my thoughts. But I hope that this is helpful in sort of thinking about where these lenses fit overall.